Hello, everyone. We are live with Agile Genesis. We are broadcasting to LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and I believe we might be on X, although I'm not seeing the logo here. So if we're not, that's coming soon. We have Peter Borsella from Window Management today with us. Peter has been a regular guest in our podcast, and we're very happy to have Peter with us again. Peter, welcome.
Thank you for having me again, Ernesto. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
And today we have an exciting topic. We have a topic that I know it's very dear to you, Peter. That is dependencies. In particular, how to master dependencies in Agile teams. When we spoke about getting together and having a session that could truly be valuable for our listeners, you immediately said, "Oh, I got it." Right? We need to talk about dependencies. So tell us why that's such an important topic. What about dependency drives you?
I think, yeah, the thing that has made it such a point of interest for me is because the repeated struggles that I've seen teams experience that oftentimes boil down to dependencies. I mean, we know there's lots of struggles that teams go through, but over the years, it's kind of surprised me at how the different types of dependencies they encounter slow them down almost to the point where it's just kind of normal. They experience it so frequently. So that's probably why I'm so fascinated with the topic.
Yeah, it's such a common dysfunction, if you will, if we want to consider it a impediment or a dysfunction or something that slows the teams down, period, right? It
Yeah,
seems
and
to
I
be
like the
more
word
over.
dysfunction because we don't use the word dysfunction in a derogatory manner. It's just like it's a missing function, right? It's not working. It's not functioning the way it's supposed to work, right?
So describe to us what is a dependency, right? One of the things we've been trying to do is to speak the language of everyday individuals at work dealing with some of the headaches that we're trying to address. Describe what that means. What do we mean when we are talking
Yeah.
about dependency, please?
So let's start speaking generically. Common everyday life, right? A dependency is going to be an action or an entity or maybe even a person that is relying on another, and usually the first cannot move forward without support from or resolution of the second, this dependent agent. There's an implied order of work, right? When we have dependencies, meaning that one action must take place before another. Now, more specifically, in an agile environment, what we're primarily talking about is those definitions of dependency, right? That prevents work specifically from progressing, unless that dependent activity or procedure is resolved. So there's probably some other ways it affects agile teams, but the big one that I uh, you know um, am focusing on is it prevents work from progressing. And in fact, in more dramatic terms, I often describe a dependency as it's something that's going to crush your ability to deliver. Sometimes in very subtle ways.
Yeah, that's a very good takeaway, right? And great. I love that definition. What's a dependency? Well, something that's going to crush your ability to deliver because you're waiting on something to happen. You made a commitment and now you can't move. You're sitting on your hands, as they say, because you're either waiting on something to free up. That would be a resource dependency. You're waiting on a subject matter expert to chime in. That's a knowledge dependency, or you're waiting on a particular task to be completed so yours can start because you have a start or stop and start type of structure about that.
Right, right. And in an ideal world, our teams would be 100% independent, right? The word, right, independent, right? They wouldn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, so that's exactly where I was going. Great minds think alike. Like the reality is that dependency simply exists. Don't we just acknowledge that and move on? Is there anything that you can do about the fact that I'm waiting for someone to finish something? How do we address this problem?
Well, I think yeah, that's the syndrome, right, that I was describing in the intro as to why I'm fascinated with this, because the acceptance, sometimes the dependencies are so prevalent that teams just kind of shrug their shoulders and say, well, here we are again. But yeah, certainly there are things we could do. I think, Ernesto, would it be okay, maybe if we first looked at the different types of dependencies? Because I'd be um, um, reluctant to start getting into the solutions and like, well, there might be different solutions depending on the type of dependency. You listed some specific categories, but I'm thinking about different type of team dependencies. It might be
I
best if I
love
just
that,
jump
Peter.
in. Is that okay?
I love that because that will put it into context for individuals. Uh, and by
Yeah.
the way, for those that are on the live session, please let us know that you're here. Chime in. Let us know where you dialed
Um,
in from, whatever that might be. If it's a different country or if it's a different state, whatever that might be, just chime in. But more importantly, let us know the questions and comments that you have. We want to address. That's why we do these live, right? We could go into a studio and record these and put them out, but then we would miss the interaction that we could be having. So please go ahead and chime in. Don't be shy and ask questions that we might be able to help with. Let's see what's on your mind. So Peter, please set the
yeah,
stage for what these dependencies look like so that we can then move into how we might address them in terms of
yeah.
strategy.
Thank you. Because yeah, it might be helpful if I can share how I think about this. And if you think about it differently, of course, we can discuss that. It's safe to assume that we're talking about a team-based environment here. Um, and I'm probably going to refer to some common Scrum terms. When we talk about a list of things, if I say product backlog, you know what that is. If we talk about the person that's setting direction, and I say product owner, you know who that is. But if there's anything that needs clarification, please let's pause and address that. So I tend to categorize, if you will, dependencies into three groups, three different kinds. And the first kind, right, I would call intra team dependencies. Those are dependencies that take place between team members within one team. So I finished this, but you didn't finish your part. Hold on, now we're out of sync, right? Second category, inter-team dependencies. So inter-team would be team A has a dependency on team B, and how do they coordinate with each other? So now you're getting bigger automatically, right? Because now you're talking about multi-team. And then the third category that I refer to would be what I call extra team, meaning outside of the team environment. So it could be like a business partner, it could be a vendor, it could be another department, and in those extra team dependencies, uh, they tend to be pointing to teams outside of our structure here that are not following agile approaches.
I love that. And we could even dissect that a little further, right? Because within that external, or as you're call it, inter-team dependencies, that we could move into intra-organizational dependencies and
Right.
inter-organizational dependencies.
Right.
One of the big headaches
Yeah.
we work with, especially in an agile environment, how do you do this well if you have vendors or if you are a vendor to an agile team? How do you incorporate that whole process in a way that minimizes the risk, right?
Yeah, and that I would say that that is the most challenging, and potentially the most complex dependency to deal with, and oftentimes the most damaging to delivery. And it's not because we don't appreciate our partners and our vendors. That's not it. It's just that oftentimes, they're heading down a completely different path using different processes than what we're using. Oftentimes, we're one of many customers of theirs. Oftentimes, they've been around for years. They have things that have been in place a certain way, and for us to come in and now expect them to change that. Oh, how about this one? Oftentimes, they have contractual agreements. I was in a situation. This was just amazing, where this local team could not get something done because the vendor was on a completely different schedule and set of expectations for how they were going to deliver. And I investigated further about, like, well, is there a way to start talking to the vendor about how we can synchronize? And the answer I got was, well, the contract we have with them doesn't allow for that. It's like, wow, that was mind blowing, you know.
Yeah, and a lot of that sometimes comes from the fact that we want to frame that contract to as much control as possible, and the wrong assumption is that if we talk to the customer, they're going to introduce a change that is going to throw off the project, right? We want to stabilize this project. So, no conversation, so that we have a plan and we stick to that plan. But that, over the years, over the decades, has shown to be a very ill way of working. In the end, we usually end up delivering the wrong thing, something that the customer
Yeah.
has buyer remorse about, because now they're getting something that might have been relevant when they originally signed the contract, but no longer fits their need, or the interpretation of what was delivered was completely different than what that original description might have been.
Right, right. And what I've learned also is when people talk about hybrid structures. I mean, you've heard that term, right? A hybrid structure. And it's not mixing different agile practices. The hybrid structure is you have some agility going on, but you're wrapped in waterfall process. And those are just rife with dependencies. So I've done this little translation in my mind now. When someone says we're in a hybrid organization, I think, oh, okay, you've got dependencies on the front end, you've got dependencies on the back end.
Yeah, that you used a keyword there that I've been using a lot, that translation, right? The fact that as agile coaches, a good part of what we do is also serve as a translation layer for the parts of the organization that are agile, that understand what cross functionality. I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but that others may not. And how do we communicate and try to find alignment between
Yeah.
those?
Yeah. So one of the conversations I have when I'm coaching teams that are needing to work with non-agile areas is to think about the language that you're using. If you go to another department that isn't agile, and I'm just going to pick on, like, it could be the legal department or security or whatever it might be, and you start speaking this language that is foreign to them, like, hey, we're about to start our next iteration, or worse, if you say start our next sprint, right? And by you not being ready to work with us, we won't meet our definition of done. Like, well, what does that mean to people who aren't engaged in this, right? So why not use just common language when you're speaking with those other agents? Hey, it's a long running project, but we work in these 2 week cycles. We kind of reset every 2 weeks and reevaluate what we should be focused on. And at the end of 2 weeks, we review what we've done, and then we verify what the next set of work we should focus on for the 2 weeks following that. And we have a checklist, in parentheses, definition of done, right? We have a checklist of things that we want to make sure we can check off before that 2 week period is up, so we can validate that we've completed what we set out to accomplish. And guess what? You're on that checklist. And we can't check that off because you're on your own schedule. So how can we start talking about how you work and how that compares to how we work? And maybe we can come up with a way, that we can help each other.
I love that. And now we're starting to get a little bit into the strategy. How do we address some of these issues that we come across? So, what are some of your more used strategy? What are some of your favorites, tricks of the trade, if you will, for addressing these dependency impediments that tend to come up?
Um, I could talk about this a long time, Ernesto. So,
We've got time, we've got listeners. Let's hear it.
let me refer first to Craig Larman and Bus Voda, two scaling experts, and one of the things they recommend in answer to that question, Ernesto, is, well, how about this technique? Just talk. It's a great tool. Just talk. But putting that aside, um, you are going to have different techniques depending on the category of dependency that we're talking about. Now, we can jump right into the most difficult case, but that we might be missing some important aspects if we don't acknowledge some of the techniques that we should consider in the more straightforward cases. So, if it's okay, can we just spend a little bit of time looking at each category and see what makes sense?
I love that.
Um, so the first category, right? The intra team. Well, let's come back to my somewhat humorous recommendation of just talk, right? It's like, hey, you're part of the same team. You plan together, right? You discussed what you were going to focus on over this next period of time. You're coordinating day by day, right? As the cycle is progressing, work it out, and I could help facilitate that, if you're having a hard time agreeing on a solution. But this is actually a growth opportunity, I think, a growth opportunity for team members to understand how to work together and overcome some of these challenges. Your team configuration might also influence your ability to do this. So I'm sure you've seen this, Ernesto. Um, you've seen teams, right? They're cross-functional teams, but there's a line down the middle where you have the people who do the building and the people who do the testing, let's say, and sometimes there's a little bit of throwing over the wall, even when it's on the same team. So there's a great opportunity here to help that team grow in their self-management to work through those intra-team challenges. I would start with the planning that goes on for the iteration.
So,
Let
Peter,
yeah,
you asked me to keep you honest as far as the terms or the
yeah,
terminology. You used a term that we use quite often because it's essential to how we work, and that's cross-functional teams. Can we help to define that so that everyone understands
yeah.
what?
Yeah, thank you. No, and I'm going to throw a couple of additional terms if that's okay. So, um, cross-functional means you have different functions as part of your team. Well, what do the functions provide to the team? Well, one of the ways they provide different functions is different team members bring different skills to the team. Another way is different team members bring different levels of experience with certain domains, right, that they've been involved in. So they bring the different functions together across people in a manner that provides all of the functions needed to deliver a completed work product.
Love that.
Now, the best, the best, well, I shouldn't say the best, Vanessa, because there's always exceptions, right? But
Better or the preferred.
the preferred, let's talk about the preferred. The preferred cross-functional team will be complete to the degree that amongst themselves, they can take a request from the business side, from the product side, work on it, and complete it by the end of the iteration. That would be the best, right? That would be great. And the other term you might hear, if you can do that, if you can create a team that can do that, you might hear that team is called a feature team. And what that refers to is that they can deliver an entire feature, right, themselves. They're somewhat independent in that regard. They have all the skills, they have all the functions, they're cross-functional. Give me your request, we'll work on it and deliver it at the end. So what would be the less preferable? team configuration, what we might call component teams. Teams that are segregated by skill, maybe even segregated by domain. There might be some good reason for doing that,
Or by
but
function, right? They're no
by
longer cross-functional.
function,
They are
yeah.
unifunctional, right?
Oh, there you go. So instead of a cross-functional team, you have multiple unifunctional component teams. And that's where you might see the situation of having, well, I got my team of designers, I got my team of builders. If you're doing software, that might be programming, and I got my team of testers. So what have you created by doing that? You've built in to your team configuration by default cross team, inter team dependencies. Right.
You
So that
designed it that way, right?
you
It's
designed it
meant
that
to
way.
work that way. Yeah.
Right. Now, I want to be careful because there are some situations where that makes sense. For most people, it creates more heartache. You know.
So what might be a situation where that makes sense? Because I have to admit, I struggle to find situations where that's an advantage.
Yeah. Probably the first one that comes to mind, Ernesto, would be a situation where the designers and let's stick with software if that's okay. I mean, we can talk about anything if you wanted to. We can talk about braking systems or marketing firms. So let's talk about software just to be on a level playing field here. So the example I've seen is where the designers, the UX people, the experts, the people that put together the wireframes, the people that know exactly where every pixel goes, right? That profession. Right? There are some environments where they are more aligned with product and marketing than they are with actual delivery. So they view themselves almost like as part of the product team that's helping define what's needed. Now, where I've seen that are organizations where every pixel matters, right? There are plenty of organizations out there. Well, look, I can say it, Ernesto. We're both currently living in South Florida. A lot of cruise lines are based down here, right? And when I've done some work with cruise lines, one of the things I've come to realize is when you're in the office, it's not about the cruise, right? It's about selling seats. It's about selling cabins on the
Wait,
cruise.
you're telling me these guys aren't on the cruise ship by the pool planning how they're going to sell seats?
Uh, No, no, it's not quite what I thought it was going to be. And sitting with the team and listening to how they're taking direction from product. There's a whole group of people over here, product people, discussing and debating, the color and the pixel location and things like that. And then when they're ready, because they've done all the research on eye movement and all that, when they're ready, then they bring requests to the team. Now, look, I've had colleagues, Ernesto, say, "Oh no, Peter, you're just kidding yourself. Those designers should be on the team." I'm just sharing an example of where an organization decided it was better to create component teams from their own experience. And look, that's really the bottom line, right, Ernesto? It's not a matter of whether I agree with it or not. It's a matter of is that working for you, right? Is that the best
I love
solution?
that.
And have you tried both so you can verify that one works better than the other?
How is that working for you? That's a key question that if we ask ourselves that more regularly, we are going to continuously improve. And I like to think of it that any solution we offer is situational. It depends on your environment, right?
Yeah,
The idea that you would have a cross-functional development team with, in your example, and this is me inserting my opinion on it, so I apologize, where you would have a UX individual sitting on it in that team. It's ideal when we're creating a front end for the application that we're building. We depend on that individual in order to create that value at the end of our development cycle, aka a sprint. So to go out and try to get that person's time to produce what we need in order to put it into the application to then build it and deploy it has a high risk. In that situation, I would coach for a cross-functional team. I would ask for an individual from the UX team to be placed on that team, even if for a sprint or two sprints, depending on the particular scope.
Yeah.
In a situation where that UX or that designer is working on creating advertising material for the sales people to pick up where that left off, it might make more sense to create a cross-functional team that is sales and marketing oriented with the individuals there to deliver that.
Right. Right. Can I share something with you, if you don't mind? Because this is the problem with you and I, Vanessa, or you and me, you and me, right? So I saved this. I saved because I think it's almost humorous. Tuesday, November 28th, Wall Street Journal, right? What happens when tech nerds meet ad nerds? This is a full page ad that a company posted to tout how they have what? Created a cross-functional team. That's news? I mean,
I love that.
oh, and by the way, there is another example where you might intentionally create, component or uni functional teams. If you have a skill that is rare and needed only on occasion, you might not be able to afford like a data scientist. You have one data scientist that 10 teams go to when they have a question. You're not going to put 10 data scientists, on all those 10 teams.
Yeah, and that has been a misinterpretation, in my opinion, in a lot of cases where some of the hardliners say, no, 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 you have to get 10 architects and put those in 10 different teams. Well, and the leadership is saying, well, we can't afford that. Well, you're not agile then, and this is about the situational approach that we covered earlier. It
Yeah.
does have the consideration of the product in how you structure your teams.
Right. Now, Ernesto, I think I've led us off track though, because we were talking about some
Is
of the
there such thing? Isn't there a whole world of things that we need to talk about?
so it's all interesting. So that was all focused on the single team situation, right? The intra team dependency and things that you want to keep in mind to minimize those. The second case would be the inter team dependencies, and some of the things that I'd be thinking about to help with that. Consistent messaging across teams. So if I can use the term product owner or product manager, right, the person that's setting direction, one person, please, setting direction if they have three teams, so that there's a consistency. Because in this case, we know that there's dependencies across them, right? So make sure the messaging is clear. Um, uh, Figure out how to distribute the work. If you can distribute the work across the teams in a manner that minimizes dependencies, why wouldn't you put the thought into that ahead of time instead of just willy-nilly, distributing it? And then the other thing I would strongly suggest is having one or two representatives from each of the dependent teams to be ambassadors across the teams.
So let's use some actual terms. I see that you're using the translation layer for individuals, but let's bring it home for them. What does that role entail? Who are those individuals, and what would be a scaling framework, for example?
I'll use like the unofficial old term for this, if that's okay. Scrum of scrums. There's probably other terms for it. Right, Scrum of scrums is not an official term, right? It's just a common practice that has come about where one or two ambassadors, representatives, delegates, they agree to coordinate with the other ambassadors. Why not do that in a daily checkpoint like the daily scrum? Why not have a daily opportunity for those ambassadors to come together? We call that the scrum of scrums. Now, who should be those ambassadors. I'm going to take a chance here because I've gotten some heat on my answer. It should be a technical person from the team. I've had people say, no, it should be the agile coaches from each team, or the scrum masters from each team, or even the product owners from from those teams. And I'm like, I'm talking about, remember, cross team, inter team dependencies. Those dependencies tend to be more technical in nature, day to day technical issues. Hold on a second. You gave me this, but it's not working, or it's not working the way I thought it was going to work. Technical issues are best dealt with technical people, what we would call our developers on the team. And I've seen some well-intentioned, very helpful scrum masters say, no, we'll take care of that. We don't want to burden the developers. We'll take care of that. And sometimes that works out great, but also sometimes what happens is the scrum masters or the agile coaches, they really just end up putting in another layer of communication between the team members. So just let the team members come together and talk. And agile coach, you can be the facilitator of that discussion and make sure it happens and that you have representation. And then what you might very quickly discover is, well, hey, this could be really helpful on a day-to-day basis. Maybe we should start doing more of this. Like maybe we should have this discussion at the beginning of every iteration when we're planning to make sure that our plans are aligned. And maybe at the end of each sprint, let's say, when we have our review of the work that was completed, we should do this again and verify what each team has produced. So that's how I picture, right? Some very simple, low structure solutions to start. We know there are bigger solutions, right? Right. There's like release trains and things like that, and PI plans, and all the good stuff, right, to help teams coordinate for sure. I'm getting down to the ground level here, with just one team trying to figure out how to coordinate with another team.
Yeah, and by the way, I agree. That's whiskey there, by the way, that you see in the background.
Yeah, I saw.
I agree with all of your scenarios. You said you're going out on a limb and you've gotten heat. I don't think there is a one size fits all here for who represents the teams. That may vary, again, depending on the scenario. It actually segues well into what I normally coach organizations to take the first step toward creating an agile playbook, because an agile transformation is a fingerprint. Every organization has their own. We have the rules of the game just to keep us in the rails of agility and agile manifesto alignment. But within that, the expectations are that our people, our process, and our techniques are going to be inserted into it. So we need to plan on what works best for our situation. And I think every scenario that you presented is a fair one.
Ernesto, I love the fingerprint idea. That's so much more accessible, welcoming to the idea that, hey, we're all kind of looking for the same thing, but we each have our own stamp, right, on how we might go about doing that. I like that. Can I borrow that fingerprint?
Oh, it's yours. What's mine is yours, Peter. uh, I love this. And so we talked about cross-functional teams. We talked about the product owner or the individual that can describe the particular work item or the product backlog item in such a way that could reduce dependencies. And one thing that I maybe not as elegantly say sometimes to my product owners during coaches, look, you need to be cognizant that this is a garbage in, garbage out game. If what you are describing is not structured properly, it's going to have an impact on how well the teams can deliver that or not. So describing those items in such a way that they are created for that team in order for that team to create them well, it's a key element that a product owner needs to orient around, right? If we are creating product
Yeah, and
backlog items that by design are having all of these expectations from outside the team, we're setting them up to fail.
And I think you would also agree, Ernesto, that not all of our product owners have the technical depth to recognize when they're about to create a problem. So that's why we want our developers or technical people also to participate, right, in the refinement, right, of those items to help the product owner validate that, yeah, this is a good way, this is organized. I think this will help us as opposed to hinder us.
So a thought off the cuff, this is me thinking out loud. During that product backlog refinement conversation that the product owner and the developers are having, maybe a key question is, does this have cross-functionality built in? Are there dependencies that we can eliminate if we describe it or create it differently? That should be a key question maybe that we all ask ourselves during those sessions.
Right, right. And again, I think that's why you need full team participation in some product backlog refinement discussions, right? It's not just the product owner working with stakeholders, right? You got to get your team as part of that refinement discussion so you can get those additional technical perspectives. And I wouldn't expect my product owner to understand all of those potential pitfalls, right? So, this isn't something else I repeat, Ernesto. If I've said it before, forgive me, but this isn't written down anywhere. But we know that product owners, um, business owners, whatever we want to call them, right? We know already this is written down, right? That they're responsible to connect to, listen to, collaborate with their primary stakeholders. What's not written down, but I strongly believe in, your developers are also primary stakeholders. Right? They're not order takers, right? They're collaborative business partners. So product owners, view them that way, so you can solicit their feedback around how to organize the work to minimize the dependencies.
Yeah, that's a great point, Peter. One that I've been harping on more and more lately, especially with the latest revision of the Scrum Guide, the 2020 version, where it it eliminated the term development team, and now we address them as developers. That
Yeah.
was strategic. There was a reason for that. It wasn't to save printer ink. It was to make the team a cohesive unit where everyone is a active participant. There isn't a product owner and a team. There's no sub-team formation. So the product owner is a on the ground individual that is part of the team and is executing with the team during the sprint. They might not be behind a keyboard, but they play a vital role in that delivery. Working daily, developers and the business, if that sounds familiar, we get that guidance from the Agile Manifesto, right?
Yeah.
So we design it in such a way that they are both active members, and to your point, there's an interaction that is happening on a daily basis. Okay?
Yeah. And I'm realizing again, I've skewed us off. We didn't, hey, look, this is your show, right? So, cut me down. But like, we didn't
Let it
get to,
roll.
okay, what are some of the things you can do if you're in that most drastic situation with extra team dependencies? So are we ready to hit that one, or do you want to still talk some more
I have
about?
a key question for
Yeah.
you that I'm often faced or asked and face myself because I think it's so common. We will um, add value to the listeners by addressing small teams. And if
Mm,
we could touch on that briefly before we move to the macro, staying at that individual level. Here's a common occurrence. You and I know we've been in the same project where this has been the case, working with clients where you have a team of 4 people or 4 developers, and one of them is a front end, the other one is a back end, the other one is a tester, and the other one is this individual that is a subject matter for the product. I get it. I should have cross-functional team. I think I have them, but this one individual is now going to take up the full development cycle, the full sprint, just to get one thing done, and the other 3 are idle. How do we handle that type of silo within the team just by the
Mhm.
size or by the expertise that each individual has?
Well, if I could put my management hat on, for a few minutes to respond to that, uh, one of the one of the few things that would keep me up at night, was having a critical team, meaning like the organization was looking towards this team, to complete, and recognizing that there's at least one. I'm going to use a term that uh, is not my best way of describing it, but I think it makes the point. And having a single point of failure on the team, meaning, so Ernesto, I think I understand you're talking about, like, them working together and such. I'm now stepping back, and from a management perspective, I got that situation where there's only one person on that team who knows a particular skill or is experienced on a particular domain. Again, like we talked about earlier, we have intentionally set up a team for intra-team dependencies that might be more excessive than what we thought would happen. Well, so I step back from a management perspective because I think this applies whether you're agile or not. If you're working on something that the organization is dependent upon, and why would you work on anything else? If that's the case, and you've seen before when this one person is out sick or this one person's on vacation, like, all the work stops. So I think that in addition to your question about size, I think we also have some responsibility to recognize health, right? Health of the team in terms of their ability to share work. And I'm not looking for full stack teams. I mean, yeah, we love full stack teams. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for, hey, I need two people on the team that understand this technology. I need two people on the team that have worked on this system before. So by default, if you follow along with that, I'm automatically expanding the team size. And sometimes it doesn't mean those two are both experts. It could be one of them is the expert and the other one is the mentee, right? Who's learning about that. But when the expert takes vacation, work doesn't stop. It
I
keeps
love that.
going. And unfortunately, I've seen some bad behaviors associated with this. I was in a sprint planning discussion, with a team I was coaching, and it became obvious very quickly there was this one person, the only person who could work on this type of request. And the product owner had brought a lot of requests that were all going to require this one person. So you understand team capacity, right? So you have this large team capacity. You got 5 or 6 people, and they've just looking at the power behind them, they've got a lot of capability, except in this one area there's only one person. So what happened? That team could only bring in a fraction of what the product owner wanted, because it had to flow through the constraints of this one person. And our attempts to change that met with political resistance, because there was a certain amount of pride and an opportunity that this one person wanted to hold on to. They didn't want to share that out. And what
Sure,
we
you're stepping into my grounds, right? This is
Yeah.
my job security now that I'm sharing with you, so you better earn it.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
it's
from a
not a healthy.
management perspective, right? Yeah. This is why I say, hey, this now becomes a management perspective to understand what type of support do they need to bring to those teams to reduce that level of intra-team dependency, right?
And we have
Was
a
that where you were
term called.
going with that? Did I?
Totally, entirely, 100% agreeing. That was the point I was hoping would surface, right? This term that we often use was just creating T-shaped individuals, right? That is an individual that is deep in
Right,
one expertise level, but can perform other functions if needed. They're not the
right.
best at it, but they can step in and help, right? If the ball is in front of me, I might not be a three-point shooter, but I'll take a stab at throwing it and maybe we'll score 3 points, right? It's not what I trained for all my life, but I can shoot a ball.
Yeah.
So this idea of cross-functional individuals is related, but strategically can be harnessed in conjunction with a cross-functional team.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Love it. Now, I know you wanted to get to the topic of inter-team collaboration or
Extra team.
inter-organizational
Yes.
collaboration,
Yes.
extra team collaboration. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk
Yeah.
about that, please.
And interorganizational works too. I like that too. Um, so now I've got some disappointing news about this case, and I'll try to summarize it, and then we can go into the details as you see fit. If I've got a team that's fully capable, except they rely on an external agent, a department, a partner, a vendor, whatever it might be, they need that area in order for their own work to proceed. And that other area is not agile. They don't work in iterations. Let's keep it extreme. Let's make it the worst case, right? Because what we can talk about the easy cases. Let's talk about the worst case. They don't know about agile. They don't want to know about agile. They don't care about agile. Right? They work in a certain way. And we already talked about communicating in common language and such. But here's the bad news. And please tell me I'm wrong about this, because I'd love to be wrong. Here's the bad news. You have to adjust your priorities and your schedule to match what that external agent can provide. You need something now for this sprint. That external agent says, I can't help you with that for a month and a half. Guess what? You can't work on that item right now. You have to change its priority, put it on the shelf. You'll come back to it in a month and a half, because you're not going to get that external agent to change just because you say, hey, I need it now. Now, of course, you can escalate. Of course, you can do those things. But if that's what you're dealing with sprint after sprint, it's not going to work. And this is the worst case where our contract says we don't have to abide by your schedule. The contract was signed by the owner of your company. They're family members. They're distant cousins. They're not going to change the contract. They're not going to get a different partner, a different vendor. That's not changing. You have to accommodate. So if you have to accommodate, now what do? Make it visible. Put it on a chart, put it on a calendar. Okay, here we are. This is our priority item. We're blocked, and we anticipate we will be blocked for a month and a half. But here it is, so everybody knows. There's no secrets, and we're going to keep tabs on that external agent, checking in with them periodically to make sure they're still on plan, because we don't want to get to that point where they said they would have it in a month and a half and we're ready to work on it, and they come back and say, oh, sorry, we had a problem. It's going to take another month for us to complete that. So yeah, worst case, make it visible, accommodate their schedule, keep tabs on them, and hold them accountable, right, to doing their part that they promise. And then behind the scenes, you can work on long-term changes like getting a new vendor or changing the contract or getting an additional vendor, a second vendor. Those really difficult things that could involve some politics, but you can have that running under the current, right, while you're just dealing with the reality of where you are.
I love that. I think it's real. A couple of things come to mind based on those. First is the idea that we have a blocker. We call that out, an impediment. We need an impediment escalation route with individuals that own each particular escalation. This is where we get the leadership. I'm often asked, what does leadership do in a Scrum team when there are 3 roles and there isn't a 4th one for a manager or for a director? Well, impediment removal is a extremely valuable way of getting these teams to produce better and faster. And
Yeah.
one of those impediments is a dependency that we have on an external vendor, where those leaders have the decision-making ability to make a change, whether that be a different vendor, whether that be to have different negotiations or whatever that might be. Let's put that on the table for getting help and not sitting on our hands for 3 months hoping that it comes our way.
Yeah. And you might, you know what? You might have to sit on your hands for 3 months while the renegotiations are taking place. So even if you have to suffer through that, what are you doing to make it better for the next time?
I love that. The other thought, you mentioned very um, apologetic or in a very apologetic way about the fact that you're going to be as slow as your weakest or as your slowest point. This is systems thinking. We teach it, we preach it, we coach it. This is a system. If you have a slow point in that value stream, you are going to be as fast as that slowest point. In other words, you're stuck.
Yeah.
So you need to
Yeah.
look at your entire development cycle to produce that increment. And wherever that slowest point is, if that's your external vendor, that's the speed that you're going to be moving at. And you need to
Yeah.
do something about it.
Yeah. Good
We do
words.
nothing by improving the team. We can't improve the team's performance. We can't go coach the team to get faster because, well, there is a step in that value stream that is slower. So we need to look at the system.
Right. Yeah. Well put. Well put. This is one of the reasons why I like working with you. You take something that took me 10 minutes to explain and you consolidate it into like bullet sentences. Yeah. System thinking. Yeah. You're only as fast as your slowest dependency. Right.
I love that. And then the third thought that came to mind is the US government came up across this or up against this challenge constantly. This is where the Department of Defense Agile BS criteria comes from, right? I didn't make that up. That's an actual way of the US government evaluating companies to do business with them because they're agile. And
Yeah.
the reason for that was because they quickly realized that if we're going to be agile and we're getting most of our services from vendors, we need them to be agile so that we can include them in our development cycle and move faster.
Yeah, a few number of years ago, I think the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, um, uh, you can look this up from a number of years ago. It actually included a requirement, but this is a budgetary requirement that agile procurement will be brought into play as they're trying to find providers and vendors.
That is key. How often do we not do that in the corporate world? How often do companies select a vendor based on their being the cheapest, not necessarily the more compatible? That's a key, right? Selection is a big part.
Yeah, and so now we're back to see. This is why this what could be a very tight, consolidated topic just expands into so much because now you're into leadership, management, support, and understanding of the agile transformation that's taking place. So that are they even thinking about that when they're negotiating the contract? Right. So that, of course, that's going to reflect on how intimately they're involved in that transformation.
Yeah, all of those components move the needle, and eventually we'll have a smoother project or smoother product development. Um, but there isn't a silver bullet that is going to fix your dependency issues because they might be coming from different sources, whether that be the lack of
Right.
team-shaped individuals, whether it be non-cross-functional teams, whether it be external vendors that simply are absent and can't commit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great example of the difference between, and I'm going to say management intentionally, just to make a point, right? The difference between management support of the agile transformation and agile involved explicitly with the transformation. Because you could say you support it, but if you're not willing to go down to that vendor and sit at their table and negotiate with them in a manner that's going to give you the services that will support the transformation, then you're really just saying it, but you're not believing it in your actions.
Can I double down on that? Can I put it even at a stronger level of involvement? Can I say management ownership of the agile transformation?
I like that. I like that. Yeah, that's a much better way of putting it. It makes it much more clear. You're not a participant. You're not just a participant, right? You own this. Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Love that.
Excellent. All right. Now, there are individuals watching and will be watching this. I'm going to wonder, okay, I get all of that, but my pay scale is it's a little lower than that. I'm in this dependency hole right now. So what practical advice can we give individuals who are struggling with dependencies today? Maybe they did not have the foresight to be strategic about it, and now they're dealing with some of the pain points we just described. What can they do to alleviate that today?
Well, I don't know that it's too late, right, to bring into the discussion some of the things we talked about. So if it's between team members, okay, well, what have you done to facilitate the conversation between the team members? A difficult team member doesn't want to cooperate. What are you doing? Yeah, you don't have to wait. Across team, inter-team dependencies. Yeah, it's a struggle. It's a heartache. Have you talked to the other teams? Have you negotiated on how you can overcome this? Um, Now, the extra team or the interorganizational dependency. I could argue the same thing. I think it makes it very similar to what we talked about earlier, where hey, look, you're going to have to suffer through the current situation, but what are you doing to work to make it better for the next time? And now, I'm not giving you a solution, Ernesto, because you said it, right? This isn't a silver bullet, but can you at least identify what the dependency is? Can you clarify? Can you define it? And can you somehow expose it, make it visible? Right, either through a discussion or a chart or a blocker. What can you do to start communicating with others about what's going on, in a manner that's requesting assistance. Right.
That's a great technique. We both trained and um, are certified in scaled agile framework in SAFe, and SAFe has this board and where you're going to be putting in the things that you're delivering, and you literally use yarn to connect these things, and there's a red color for dependency so that we can see how much red we have on the board. Now,
Mhm.
the yarn and some of that might have been safe oriented, but this idea of visualizing the work and their dependency is not new. Anyone is welcome to use even that technique of the yarn, of course. Um, whether you're practicing Scrum at Scale, whether you're practicing less, whether you're practicing safe, visualization is a key element that helps the conversation, right? There's another mechanism for visualizing this, and that is in value stream mapping, where we are literally seeing the type of wait time that we have versus work time, and then we're adding those and we're saying, whoa, we have 2 months of wait time and 2 days of work. This could be done better, right? So putting that in front of people, creating that visualization, that information radiator, it's a great way to start acknowledging that we have an issue and we can improve.
Yeah, and
And then
I've
maybe
seen
there's shadow programs.
the what?
I was
Sorry.
going to introduce the aspect of shadowing for those individuals that want to become more cross-functional within themselves. Right? Many
Right,
different
knowledge
practices.
transfer. So you got single point of failure. You mean like, okay, well, in the next planning session, this was going to take this one person 10 hours, so make it 20 hours and have them pair with someone else, and teach them what they know.
A workshop. Our dearest product owners can come together to look at the product from a dependency perspective and identify the items that have dependencies and
Yeah.
explore with the team how those could be reduced by slicing it differently, or by even sometimes moving it from one team to another with the other team's collaboration, of course, in mind, so that we are reducing those.
Right.
Sometimes moving people might be a wise thing to do, right? We want to do that with the proper consideration, but that could also
No,
help
that's a good
procrastination.
point. You might have to acknowledge you need to reconfigure your teams.
The
It could be a
restructure
yeah.
aspect of things
Yeah, it
is a
could be a
big
little
win.
painful, but the end result will be much better. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Peter, we just hit the 1 hour mark, and we do this all the time. Time just flies, and I really mean that. For those of you watching, Peter and I have these conversations all the time, and our meetings just continue to expand in a good way because, well, we love connecting and talking about these things, especially with each other.
How does this happen? I don't know how it happens, but
I think this has been a fantastic conversation, but of course, I always think that every conversation with you is fantastic. I hope our viewers agree. So, Peter, I really want to thank you for another great session. You're always welcome here. I hope we can have another session together soon. We are constantly putting out these on a periodic basis. We try to keep a cadence of a weekly live session, and you're always welcome to come on and join myself and whiskey. Very
thank
well. Thank
much
you, Peter. Have a great day. We'll talk soon.